I just advise members that all mobile phones must be set to airplane mode and on silent or turned off because it will interfere with the Assembly's recording. Okay, members, moving on, agenda item 1, apologies. I've one apologies from Daniel, the Chair. Any other apologies? Okay, if not, agenda item 2, draft minutes of the meeting on the 8th of June. Can I refer members to the draft minutes of the meeting on the 8th of June, which is pages 5 to 7 of your packs? Members, are you content that I sign those as being accurate?
Yep.
Members, I have no matters arising. Does anybody else anything? Okay, members, moving on then. Correspondence. There are no items of correspondence received for this meeting to date, so move on then. Agenda item 5 is Kieran said, isn't it?
Yes.
Members, agenda item 5 is an inquiry into the Department of Education sustainability of schools and a memorandum of replies. Could I just invite Kieran and put them forward? Eddie.
Thank you,
Kieran,
Chair.
you're very welcome. Members, agenda item 5, for the memorandum of reply from the Department of Finance on the inquiry into the Department of Education sustainability of schools. This is pages 11 to 22 of your pack. Just to advise members, the previous committee produced a report on the sustainability of schools in March 16, and it contained 10 recommendations. By the way of background, the Department of Education in Northern Ireland introduced a sustainability of schools policy in January 2009, and following the findings of the Bain review, the committee found that progress to date in delivering sustainable schools policy had been modest, as evidenced by a number of indicators. There remain too many surplus places. There's a clear need for improved leadership in post-primary schools. There still remains a long tail of underachievement, which applies particularly to disadvantaged pupils, and lack of community support for some local schools indicates that parents are concerned about the quality of the education offered. It was also disappointing that the department had failed to recognise the fundamental flaws in its own management information. The committee was also concerned that the department's calculation of surplus school places is inaccurate, and that the number of surplus places may be substantially lower than the figure reported. Can I just remind members that the MOR is the Executive's formal response to recommendations in a PAC report, which is issued by the Department of Finance 8 weeks after the publication of a PAC report. This memorandum of reply states that out of the 10 recommendations made by the committee, all are accepted with the exceptions of recommendation 4 and 10, which the department has partially accepted. Members, page 19 of the pack actually details this. Can I just ask Kieran, as the Audit Office, any comments you wish to make?
Chair, well, as you've said, the vast majority of the recommendations are accepted. Particularly important one, I think recommendation 5 was about accurate data. That's basic information, so that's fully accepted, and that's important. I think at the session, I think there were indications from the figure work that the figure could potentially be overstated because a lot of the calculation was based on desktop as opposed to actually what was the state of schools. It wasn't taken into account the actual state of school buildings. So that's accepted.
Okay.
Probably the only one that isn't fully accepted was your predecessors had a recommendation of more for a review of the policy, so that one isn't.
That's recommendation 10. Kieran, just whether you can answer this in regards to recommendation 4, the department will produce an initial report on primary schools by the 31st of October 2016, following consultation with the schools. But the primary schools will inform the approach to reviewing the post-primary schools. However, the post-primary schools present an additional level of complexity. Why was there the two standards within the Department of Education, or why did they see a problem with post-primary compared to primary? Was there any clarity at that point?
I think in terms of the curriculum that needs to be delivered, it's more extensive within the post-primary sector Therefore, actually assessing capacity in that sector is a bit more complicated and complex. Our report actually showed that the number of surplus places was greater in the primary sector than in the post-primary, so perhaps that's why they're starting in that sector, partly because that's where most of the surplus places were, but also because it's an easier part of the estate to actually get measurement from initially, because the curriculum isn't quite as complex and doesn't require as sort of sophisticated a configuration of schools and so on.
Okay. Michelle?
Yeah, I'm glad that the department didn't accept the recommendation about the up-to-date design, because some of our best schools aren't anything to do with bricks and mortar, but the teachers and the staff and the ethos they're in. So I'm glad the department knocked you back on that one.
Knock the committee back. No, I think I'd agree with whenever you saw the rationale for that. I think the design, the schools estate, there are schools which are 80, 90 years old, schools which are 10 years old, and I think it's quite right that they take an approach which acknowledges that there are different designs and that it's better to look more at whether it's fit for purpose in terms of today's delivery of the curriculum.
That said, there are some schools where maybe we're down officially, say having, I think we say the argument, 50 surplus places, but they didn't really, because of the design of the building. You couldn't actually accommodate 50 people in.
Okay.
So it was just getting the management information up to date.
I think that was the
simple
real...
as a basic information point.
That was the real problem. There was a disconnect between the department's figures of surplus places and what schools were actually saying they could deliver, and it was really just saying, get this reconciled and get the figures more accurate. One case study we looked at showed a school by the department's reckoning having, as CNIG said, 50 or 60 surplus places, and the school was saying that just isn't true. We don't have surplus places. So it was really trying to reconcile those obvious anomalies and differentials.
Okay, thank you.
Trevor?
The department has been trying to nail down the figure for empty desks for years. It's gone up. I think the highest point it reached was 85,000, and the lowest point, according to the minister, the last minister, was somewhere in the 50,000s. And no obvious rationale for the difference in those two figures. So now, recommendation 4 refers to the approved enrolment figure recorded for every school. Now, is that the capacity of the school, taking into account all the design problems, or is it the actual approved enrolment number for the school?
It should be based on the capacity, but at the margins they may allow more. One of the big difficulties, for example, is special needs pupils aren't in the figures at all. Now, what that means is, I think the last figure they said in terms of surplus places was 52,000, but in fact that doesn't count in the fact that there are about 10 or 11,000 special needs pupils around the system, and so even just getting those figures done holistically and correctly would actually probably reduce the surplus capacity figures by quite a substantial margin. So the school enrolment is a key figure in calculating surplus capacity, so it really is important that they sort of do it in a complete manner, and to exclude special needs completely was distorting the figures by a significant amount.
What's the department's explanation or rationale for not including a number of special needs pupils in a particular school?
I'm trying to, from memory, special needs pupils, if they apply for a certain school, are guaranteed a place in that school. But if the school has already filled up its full approved enrolment, the special needs will be allowed to come in on top of that. So they said it would be unfair to count them in because it would give a slightly misleading impression. But it's a bit asymmetrical, because if special needs pupils are going into schools with already surplus capacity, they're not counted there either. So there's just confusion in the figures, and not trying to justify it, just that's what the department were saying, is at the time we thought it better to get those figures visible and explicit, so that decisions are made on full management information rather than partial information.
Right. Oliver, were you?
Chair, you said school special needs go automatically enrolled in the school that they apply to.
Sorry, I'm paraphrasing that. I think that's what the department said was if a special needs, if it's determined that they are to go into a certain school, then even if that school is at full capacity, the special needs pupil will get taken in there.
I think you'd need to look at the enrolment criteria again, because that's not the case.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly not the case. There's more children now, special needs, going into mainstream schools far out of their home locality because of the admissions criteria. And that needs to be looked at, because that's certainly not the case with special needs.
Well, now, I think CNAG mentioned last week we're doing a study, or we're commencing a study on special needs, and we can maybe look at that issue more directly within the ambit of that study. Yeah.
Okay. Trevor, you were looking back on there.
Yeah, I'm sorry, it's hard to work off the screen sometimes. The introduction to this, is that your introduction, or is that coming from the department? Or?
No, that's not us.
What we have in front of us here, it's described as the Department of Finance memorandum on the 35th report from the Public Accounts Committee.
Aye, that's the executive's report.
That's the executive.
It says in the second paragraph, the Education Authority, CCMS, NICE and the Irish Medium and the Controlled Schools Council are working closely together to develop area plans for primary and post-primary schools. And I would love to see the evidence of that, because there's no history of them working closely together. In fact, NICE weren't involved at all for long enough, nor I think was the Irish Medium sector. And CCMS went their own way. I think I've said twice in the House recently. So is there actual evidence for this, that they're working closely together to try and solve the problem?
Well, I think, Trevor, in regard to this memorandum of reply which has come to the committee, it's something we can write to the department and ask for clarity on that point. It's their correspondence to us rather than the audit office.
Chair, just for your information, that was certainly one of the previous committee's concerns, and they had a recommendation in at recommendation 8 about trying to get more buy-in from other stakeholders to the area planning process, because the concern was that it wasn't sort of fully integrated, and I'm not talking about integrated, but fully integrated with all the different sectors.
You're agreeing with me?
I never comment.
Cooperation is the word you were looking for.
Cooperation, exactly.
Cooperation.
Okay, but we can seek clarity in that. Members also content that in regards to recommendation 4, we asked the department to clarify specifically their differences between primary and post-primary as well. Members content?
Sure, I'm really sorry, but
You're all right, Trevor. 9 years in the Education Committee, I understand fully.
I will maybe have to forget about that. But did you look at the trends in these things as well as the actual snapshot figure? Because the trend appears to be that at the secondary level, that by the time we get to 2025 or sometime, there actually won't be any surplus places. It might actually be a deficit, but the primary will still be a problem.
Yes, we did at the time. We looked at the longer term trends, and that's quite, population projections are obviously influenced by a whole range of extraneous factors, and certainly having been long-term decline in school populations, there is now a turning point, which...
Sorry about
Okay, no, you're all right. Members, nobody else? Members, just those 2 points of clarity then, just from the Education Authority, just on recommendation 4, and if they could provide evidence for recommendation 8 as well. Members, are you content then to seek a 12-month MOR on any update?
Yep.
Content? Okay. Members, moving on then, agenda item 6 is an inquiry into Invest to Save funding in Northern Ireland. Can I refer members to the memorandum of reply, pages 24 to 29? To advise members, the previous committee produced a report in March 2016 on its inquiry into Invest to Save funding in Northern Ireland, which contained 5 recommendations. By way of background, the Invest to Save Fund in Northern Ireland was established to allow the Northern Ireland Executive to continue to operate within a constrained budgetary position following the 2009 spending review. To allow this, it is needed to deliver sustainable cost reductions. In total of 311 million was allocated and 254 million was spent over the period of 2010 to 2015. The aim was for funded projects to have a clear link between the investment made and the savings generated. In practice, however, the scheme did not deliver in the way that they should have, and many projects were approved which did not generate any quantified savings. Even where projects did deliver savings, there was an absence of monitoring arrangements across the 3 schemes, and there was no consistent correlation and validation of reported savings. Although the committee recognised the individual accounting officers needed to be accountable for their own spending, there also needed to be a central oversight and control in a ring-fenced scheme of this nature. The lack of formal targets and the absence of central monitoring, reporting and evaluation means that it is not possible to assess the overall effectiveness and value for money of Invest to Save or to validate report savings. Can I ask, Kieran, do you want to comment at this stage?
I think this was a very important report from your predecessor committee. What's pleasing is all the key recommendations have been accepted. There's no doubt that in times of austerity, Invest to Save schemes are really an excellent way of activating projects that good quality projects that normally wouldn't get funded. But they do need a lot of sort of central discipline around them, that they work properly, and I think the response is positive. That augurs well for I think future schemes of a similar nature.
Okay. Kieran, just in regard to the recommendation 3 that the committee made, which was to change the initiatives, it's one that the Department of Finance has accepted the recommendation in principle, and that's in regard to, and ultimately how they deliver Invest to Saves if they align with budget timetables and external factors. Is there anything further there they should be clarifying? Or?
Well, I suppose that it's whether there's one on the table at the minute, it's the next one that comes up. Then I think the key thing there is that there's enough time to actually design the scheme and get controls in it up front. We did feel that the previous one was quite rushed in. And the purpose of the scheme then needs clearly communicated to the spending departments, and needs a bit of lead time as well for departments to generate quality proposals. So is that fair enough, Eddie?
Yeah, certainly that the elements of the last scheme had to be introduced very, very quickly indeed. So what actually happened in practice was that sometimes departments just put forward stuff which they were really already funding and just funded more of it. What the committee said was we'd like these type of schemes to fund new and innovative and risk-taking type of projects, and I think the EFP is fully, or Department of Finance, sorry, is fully accepting that, but just sometimes the practical reality is that budgetary allocations and decisions are outside their control and can take a bit longer than they would ideally like.
What they're saying is politicians might get in the way.
They may be saying that.
Okay. Members, any questions on that?
Here, just a couple of things. Is it the case that really it wasn't or it was spending to potentially save, really? Or that they weren't thinking about investment for the future, as a matter of spending to try and...
Well, I think there was a danger with some of the previous constructions that there may be too much premium on where there was really short-term payback. You can have good ideas where the payback is actually long-term, and there needs to be a better way of actually working those sort of projects into the thinking. What had also happened here is with budgetary pressures, some of the money that was supposed to be ring-fence had ended up doing firefighting stuff
Yes, that's
in
the
the
problem.
Department of Health.
Yeah.
So it just needs a stronger a central control around it.
Were there a number of departments involved?
Oh, well, any department could.
Any department could apply for the funding. In practice, most of the funding went to health and DRD, as was. Now, one of the issues was that an awful lot of this money was given to structure and maintenance of roads. So to some extent, while that can obviously have long-term benefits and so on, I think the feeling of the previous committee was really there was almost being a budget cut in one hand in DRD's mainstream budget, and then the Invest to Save funding was just being used to replace that. So it sort of seemed out of keeping with the spirit of the scheme.
Yeah. So is there much evidence of potential savings downstream?
I think at the time of our report, we had been able to identify a figure of about £153 million worth of savings.
Potential?
Potential. That was out of 350 million which was allocated to the projects. Now, it could be some of those will generate more returns in the future. And the department at the evidence session actually contended that they had managed to sort of identify some additional savings since then. But it would certainly, would certainly be valid for the committee maybe a year or two down the line just to follow up on what the latest position is.
Okay, thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Gordon. Members, anybody else? Okay, members, thank you. Members content for a 12-month MOR and update?
Great.
Great, thank you. Members, moving on then, agenda item 7 is an inquiry. The first inquiry of this committee and this mandate is an inquiry of the Northern Ireland Courts and Tribunals Service Trust Statement for the year ended 31st of March 2013. Members, it's MOR, apologies. Just the MOR update is at page 33 to 41. I just advised members the previous committee produced a report in January 2015 which contained 6 recommendations. The report called for the reform of the system for collecting financial penalties and highlighted that the DOJ had failed to coordinate a joint-up approach to fine collection, resulting in governance arrangements not being robust. It also highlighted that the costs associated with enforcing the system were significant and that the reform needs to be implemented as a matter of urgency. The 12-month MOR update advises that of the 6 recommendations in the PAC report, 3 have been fully implemented and work continues with the DOJ and PSNI to implement the remaining recommendations. Kieran, can I ask?
Yeah, well, there are quite a few both serious problems around the whole governance of fines. When the committee originally looked at this, there were missing 6,000 odd missing paper warrants. There was high levels of debt, and there was a major fraud of £53,000. There's a lot that's happened since, and I think the main reform is the establishment of a fine collection and enforcement programme board chaired by DOJ, and that brings together the police, the court service together. And I think originally there was a lack of joined-upness in this. There's also proposals to make it easier to pay fines. Back when the committee looked at it, fines could only be paid in cash. So some of the regulation was quite anachronistic. So that's been sorted out. But there's still a lot of work to do. If you want to elaborate, Neil?
I think it's important to see, Chair, that they have made a good deal of progress on this. As the CNAG says, there's still stuff to sort out. Actually implementing some arrangements so that for non-cash collection of warrants, so that people can go in and use a debit card or pay by electronic means. The arrangements have now been road tested. They're not up and running yet, but they will be. The really big issue is that the joint responsibilities, as the CNAG has already alluded to and as you stated earlier, didn't create the right governance conditions. It wasn't good for accountability, and it certainly didn't enhance the efficiency of the whole approach. Now we have the legislation in place to establish a civilianised collection service that will take the PSNI out of the picture entirely. This was never a priority for the police, as they would freely admit. They always felt that they had bigger fish to fry here. Having a civilian collection agency, which should now be in place from the 1st of April 2017, will effectively, we'd hope and expect, would improve the collection rates. That will deal with the issues that you've already identified around the collectability of the debt. That will also deal with the issues around fraud, which the CNAG has already referred to. Those two issues were the issues that were causing the CNAG to qualify his opinion on the account. It should go a long way towards enhancing accountability and effectiveness.
Okay. Neil, in regard to the civilianised, I suppose, force from the 1st of April 17, is it public service or is it going to be privatised, or do we know that?
It will be a public service.
It will be a public service. You mentioned two figures, 6,000 and 52,000. How long back were those figures, or were they historic? Or?
Yeah, some of them went back for years, Chair. The reason all of this surfaced and came up, there was a requirement to actually produce a new separate account for fines, and that actually, and credit to them for actually doing that, but that surfaced a lot of underlying problems with warrants that weren't actually followed up, so there wasn't a good tracking system between court service and the police. So the fact that they had to produce an account for the first time actually exposed a lot of historical problems, and where fines were collected in cash, maybe put into safes in police stations, it just wasn't properly controlled and chased up. That end of it now is much tighter. And it remains to be seen whether I can give a clean opinion on the next set of accounts. I haven't reached a verdict on that as yet.
Okay. So that tightened up system's really been only in place for a year or a few months now, so there's nothing.
Yeah,
That's correct.
Yeah.
Okay, members. Gordon?
Just a couple of points. The police, do they still have a role where there are difficulties?
The police still have a role until the new collection agency is established. As the CNAG's just said, they've tightened up their procedures considerably. They actually speak to the court service a lot more regularly. They reconcile their different records, and crucially, around the fraud issue, the cash collection procedures are much improved.
Once the new organisation is in place, then will the police have any role?
No.
None?
No.
And will the new authority will they have the power then to enforce if needed?
Yes.
They will? Fully? Yeah. Just in the general point then, are you satisfied that they have in place then the necessary procedures to review and audit the system once it's fully implemented?
Well, I think that's something for the future, really. We can't comment on the procedures in the organisation before it's actually set up.
Were the improvements to date?
The improvements to date are certainly going in the right direction. At the moment, they've implemented a lot of the recommendations.
Yeah,
Others of them are in train. If all goes to plan, then I think we could see that there would be an improvement. The CNAG's right when he says that he hasn't formed an opinion on the account that we'll be auditing in just a couple of months now. We're waiting to see what the numbers look like. There is an issue clearly around how recent all these improvements have kicked in. So whether they will have a material effect on the audit view is something that we need to test at the right time.
And if there are continuing issues there, I can bring them back to the committee, if necessary.
Okay, Trevor?
Okay, thank you.
Just in terms of collection of fines, is there a mechanism for an order against salary or benefits?
There was, but I think they weren't often used. The role of the judiciary in this is important as well, and these things are often down to the judiciary to make decisions upon.
Well, they make a decision to impose the fine.
Yep.
Just asking them if the fine isn't being collected, or if it's default, or attempt to avoid the situation, is there an opportunity through the courts to obtain an order for salary deduction?
That is what the warrant's about. If the fine isn't paid, you go back and you get a warrant. The warrant then needs to be executed.
What does the warrant actually
The
mean?
warrant empowers an officer, and it has to be an officer, to go out and collect the money in cash.
Yeah. Okay.
And the difficulty previously was with the warrants. They were just stockpiled.
Yep.
And weren't actually followed up. So that aspect has tightened up.
Under the warrant, could the enforcement authorities apply for a salary deduction order?
I believe it was possible, but I'm not aware that it was hugely used.
Just do wonder why not, you know? There you go.
All right, thanks. Member, just a matter of curiosity, money's collected went back to where?
Where's the money go?
Yeah.
The money goes back into this account and makes its way into the consolidated fund.
It doesn't go, it's not DOJ, it's not PSNI fund, it's
No,
just
it's surrendered back to the
No.
centre.
back to the centre. Okay. Members content to note this update? Sorry, Oliver, you don't?
There was a fraud there. What was that fraud?
It was actually
53,000? What?
53,000, yeah.
What was that?
Was somebody in a police station had, just, as the cash come in, had...
Yep,
the
effectively,
cash.
an officer was going out, executing warrants and using the money collected for his own purposes.
wasn't picked up because of the lack of reconciliation of outstanding warrants. Had they a proper reconciliation system, then it would have been noticed earlier.
And did this go before the courts?
Yes, in fact, the case was in the press a couple of weeks ago.
Very recently.
A suspended sentence was handed out. Suspended sentence?
I believe it was a suspended sentence. I believe all the monies have been repaid and there's been a surrender of part of the officer's pension.
Okay, members, thank you. Members, content to note the update? Okay.
Right.
Okay, thank you. Karen, Neil, thank you very much
Thank
for
you, Chair.
that session. Members, I was slightly ahead of myself. Agenda item 8 is our first inquiry into this mandate, isn't it? Yes. It's, as agreed at last week's meeting, the inquiry will be into managing legal aid, and this will be the introduction to the briefing session. Can I just advise members this is our first committee and has agreed to conduct it this week. The briefing session will be followed by the preparation session next week, and the evidence sessions will commence on the 29th of June 2016. Can I just advise members that it is preferable that they are available to attend both the preparation session and the evidence session, which is the 22nd and 29th. And I just ask members to indicate if they will not be available on either of those two dates, if they know at the minute. 22nd or 29th, Oliver.
Really need to go and celebrate that.
Okay, members of this time, just come forward from the audit office, just to brief us at this stage. Our CNAG, Kieran Donnelly, Kerry Harden, Sean Beattie, Michael Heary and Jeff Wright. Kieran, over to yourself.
Thank you, Chair. Last reported on this topic in 2011, and my report at that time was considered by your predecessors. At that stage, back in 2011, I said in my report, and the committee said something similar, that the cost of the criminal legal aid system were out of control, having grown from 22 million to 60 million between 2000 and 2010. In the same period, the cost of non-criminal legal aid grew from 16 million to 37 million. So that's just the background where we were in 2011. At that time, this committee report made a number of recommendations for improving the situation, and over the last year we have examined the department's progress in implementing those recommendations. But we also took the opportunity to look at non-criminal legal aid, the civil side. Our latest report will be published next Tuesday. The story is fairly simple. There's been a good deal of effort put into reforming the legal aid system over the past 5 years, but so far the results haven't lived up to expectations, and progress is well behind schedule. So of the 9 recommendations that your predecessors made in 2011, we feel that 5 of them have yet to be properly and fully implemented. Expenditure in legal aid has been consistently sitting at around about 100 million since 2011. And the department introduced curbs on spending on criminal legal aid in 2011, and which have had the effect of putting the brakes on the growth, but have not reduced the spend significantly. There hasn't been any significant reform of the civil side of legal aid, and that spend has gone up significantly. That's really all I want to say, Chair, by way of introduction.
Members, we can tell me moved into closed session for the rest of the brief.
Yeah.
Okay, members move into closed.